Hello, everyone, and welcome to these media author sessions. Today, we are going to talk about network programmability with Joe Clarke. My name is Hilda Arteaga, and I am a community manager of the Cisco community and the host of today's event. So first of all, I would like to deeply thank all of you for joining us today. We know these are very complicated times and not that easy for many, but we really appreciate the fact that you are joining us today. So before we start, I would like to let you know more about this program. It's someone kind of like new. So in this session, a Pearson author, a distinguished engineer, Joe Clarke, will talk about network programmability models with Yang and how they improve to achieve better network scalability, replicability, and reliability by leveraging automation. In addition, Joe will go over the content of his book. Well, he's a co-author of the book, Network Programmability with Yang, and how it leverages data model-driven management. And also in this author, what we're going to do is, first of all, as you can see on the slides, we are going to know more about Joe, his experience, and everything he has been doing in all his career. Then we are going to find out more about the story behind the book, his publications, and all the effort that Joe has been doing, as well as his accomplishments. We are going to review some trends and key content about this network programmability book, and we also will be clarifying the questions that you are placing on the Q&A panel. For all the questions, please try to place them out in the Q&A panel. It's located on the right side of your screen, or if you're on a mobile device, it's on the tiny balls that you can see at the middle of the screen. So I have a great news for you. Actually, this is a surprise. We will be giving away one copy of this book signed by Joe. So we are going to provide more details about how you can earn it, but like the key is very easy. You just bear with us on this session, and you might get a chance to win this as a free copybook. There is only one condition to get this book, and the condition is that you have to be a Cisco community member to get this one. So even if you get like selected, but you're not a community member, we won't be able to give it to you, unfortunately. So that's the only condition. Besides from that, it's free and it's signed by Joe. So let's get started with this special event. Welcome, Joe. Thank you so much for making your time to be on this event. So, Joe, you're a very well-known expert in Cisco on IoT, on the whole IoT field, in particular network management, automation, and programmability, of course. You're not only a Pearson author, but a distinguished engineer and a top-rated speaker in Cisco Live and many other events. And with all that said, there are indeed so many questions that we would like to ask you, right? And so many things that we'd like to know about you. But I think we should go with the first things first. And that is like, we would like to let you to know how you actually got into tech. Was that your passion? Was that your major? Was that some special opportunity? I don't know, maybe a promise. How did you get into tech?
Well, how did I get into IT? I guess in some ways I was always on a somewhat technical or at least STEM path. I started in university in biochemistry and molecular genetics. That's what I thought. I had this idea that I might be able to cure all disease. But I found myself spending very late nights in the computer lab, just futzing around with the old well, at the time, the relatively decent Macintoshes they had, breaking things, fixing things, taught myself Perl as a programming language, AppleScript English at the time as another programming language. Swore I'd never get into computers as a career. It was a hobby, and you make it a career, and all of a sudden then it becomes work and sucks all the life out of it. But that changed. I finally agreed that this is really where I think I can really see myself spending a lot of time in this, and it's a lot of fun. So I finally changed my major over to computer science, and convinced my advisor at the time to give me a writing credit for all the code I had written. So I needed that to graduate. And then talked to Cisco. I said, hey, I've heard of you guys. I know that nothing goes out on the internet without crossing one of your devices. And this was back in 96-ish, 97. And then they, for whatever reason, like me, they offered me a job up in North Carolina. Packed up all my stuff after I graduated and drove up and hung out in TAC for a good 19 years of my career. doing support of our network management applications, patching and writing some features on top of our Cisco Works product, messing around with SNMP. Then when we opened up things a little bit more with Tickle in iOS and the Embedded Event Manager, I jumped in at that because I got to bring in my computer science and my love for programming there. Then we started to get even more open with 1PK and having a true API on top of our devices. That was kind of short-lived because really what we were striving for, both within Cisco, our customers, as well as in the industry, was this approach of model-driven management, something that would help with the configuration of devices in a replicable way and in a consistent way across our platforms and ideally across multiple vendor platforms. So the shift from programmability to more of this dynamic and volatile API that 1PK was to something that could be more persistent in that it affected the config but could also be abstracted to the point of services in the network, became something a lot stickier and fortunately something that not just Cisco has stuck with and persisted and stayed with, but also the industry has really ramped up across all vendors and even across different standard definition organizations. And that is this trend towards model-driven programmability. So influencing and helping out with that, as well as with our new industry certifications, so helping our learning and DevNet organizations with trying to bring software programmability and automation into career certifications, not just for the new software developer career certifications, but for the network engineers as well.
Well, that's quite a story. Thank you so much, Joe. And well, actually, you have been involved in so many areas, and I know like right now you're more like related to programmability, but like networking is huge, right? And so is programmability. So do you have a favorite technology or area of interest or a particular technology that you really like a lot?
Well, it is programmability. It is the automation of, I guess, focus-wise, it's been mainly in the enterprise, what would traditionally be called the enterprise space, our iOS and iOS XE platforms. But lately, I also help run the network at Cisco Live in Europe, and they put me into the data center space. So myself and a couple of others, we go in, design the data center network that we're going to use to support the conference for Cisco. So I was saying that at Cisco Live, because of the data center, I've gotten into more of the automation on the Nexus 9K side, as well as UCS, automating UCS Manager, automating some of the vCenter VMware side of things as well. So what I've really gotten into is Ansible in particular as an automation framework, as well as just writing a mad ton of Python to glue things together. Also really enjoy the WebEx Teams, the bot type programmability, chat ops type thing where you have not just the kind of the fire and forget modality of information dissemination, but you also have the ability to have interactive self-service bots that's at least within the Cisco Live realm of having a very transient event, but something where we have a lot of people within our network operations team that needs information at different times, being able to use that as a means to provide them that information has been interesting. So I try to learn a lot of different things. I love the general field that we're in networking, but it's really around anything I'm going to get into. I'll try to learn it to some extent. Once I'm there, I don't want to keep typing things, so I'll try to figure out the quickest way to automate what I'm trying to do, and then pick up best practices and tips from others as well.
All right. Well, thank you so much, and that is true for many of you that you might don't know this. Like Joe is involved in too many things. Like he does so many things. And actually, one of the things is that you collaborate with the Internet Engineering Task Force. And could you describe this experience or share something about that with us?
Sure. So the Internet Engineering Task Force I got into a number of years ago. So there, in brief, if it's IP related, standards-based IP related on the internet, it probably goes back to one of their standards, which are described in what they call requests for comments or RFCs. So things like the HTTP protocol, things like this, RESTconf, NetConf, Yang, TCP, all of that you can look back to, and IP itself. You can look back and find the relative or related RFCs to that. A few colleagues of mine had gotten into the IETF and the standards, and I figured I'd go check it out. From an operational standpoint, so being in the network management realm, I thought, okay, I'll see what I might be able to contribute to operationally. And I got into a few working groups, just making minor comments here and there. And then I also, because of my experience with the Cisco Live Network, I got into their network operations team and started helping them roll out the network for the 3 conferences they do a year. And on top of that, I learned more automation tricks from some super uber nerds that also volunteer at the IETF, people from very prominent people from different industries, different vendors that just happen to all get together and get along and love the idea of building a network and just making the world a better place with respect to networking. And so I was having a ball with them, and I figured, you know what, I'd like to do more, I think, with the IETF, like contribute more. One of my colleagues, Benoit Claes, who's also a co-author on this book, or one of the lead authors on this book, he was an area director in operations at the time, and said, you know what, there's a working group that needs a new chair, the ops area, kind of looking over general operations topics. And so I became a co-chair of that, and we have been looking at various things, the IoT manufacturer usage description that just recently standardized went through our working group. We're looking right now at some layer 2 and layer 3 network models from a Yang definition standpoint. We are going to, believe it or not, finally ratify the TACAX Plus protocol as an informational RFC, because there are some people who want to create a true security model on it with TLS, so actually secure TACAX Plus. So we first had to standardize, but ratify the protocol. So that's happening. And we've had, in the history before I joined, a number of MIBs from the S&MP world that have gone through ops area. So it's been interesting. It's certainly a different experience dealing with those working group meetings and having to garner consensus or form consensus across academia, across operators, across different vendors that might have competing interests. So I've learned a lot. I'm still learning. It's definitely a great thing to get involved in if you have that mindset to really think through and define things that are going to be both cross-functional and integratable across multiple elements or multiple areas of the industry.
That is true, and I guess just like having that curiosity and that willing of learning, and in your case, just like not only learning and finding a way to automate like those things, that is amazing, Joe. And thank you so much for sharing that. And well, I have to say that every time I do this kind of events, I get really inspired by people like you. And I found something very interesting that I would like to ask you. Is like, you might not know this, but actually Joe is certified as a commercial pilot for single-engine airplanes.
Actually, multi-engine now. I now have my multi-engine certification.
Whoa! So actually, we have never got across with someone who is actually crossing the skies and running the skies. So how does it be? How does it feel to be a pilot, and besides from being an engineer as well?
Well, it's amazing. It was probably one of the best things I've ever done. It actually does tie nicely into engineering. It makes you a more, I think, thoughtful person. Certainly helps put stress in perspective. Um, Problem solving, like as a TAC engineer, you're always trying to think of creative solutions. As a pilot, sometimes you're faced with needing to think through things, consider your options, keep a level head. While the majority of my flights are uneventful and quite frankly awesome, I've had a few incidents up in the air, some landing gear malfunctions, uh, um, autopilot malfunctions, and it does definitely uh, give you that perspective of what am I doing from a problem-solving capability, and how do I appreciate the situation, get as much information and situational awareness as I can, and act in a thoughtful and rational manner. And albeit it is a different situation in the air, when you take that into what you're doing in triaging and working on network problems, again, it gives you that, I think, a richer perspective, and helps you kind of focus where you need to focus and try to push away some of the noise. But I would also recommend anyone who's ever had the bug. It's fairly easy to get into if you think you'd like to be a pilot, or at least try it out. Most flight schools offer discovery flights, like even in Groupon. They're fairly cheap, and it's a fun hour or so to get up in the air and see the world from a different perspective. It's quite unique in a small plane compared to the commercial planes that climb up to tens of thousands of feet fairly quickly. When you're up at about 3,000 feet, which is maybe 2,000 above the ground, you get to see things that you recognize in a very different light, and it's, like I said, a wonderful experience.
That is really amazing. Well, kind of me. I'm gonna really and seriously consider all your advice, and I'm gonna find on group on something that I can I can get just to start that flying career. So, well, thank you so much for sharing that, Joe. So, we would like to ask you now some questions about your career and how you have evolved as an author or as a co-author, and your opinion regarding some technology trends. So, my first question will be like, what has been your motivation to collaborate in the creation of books and content?
Huh. Benoit, in this case, the dude's convincing. Um, so previously, I still am active in the community. I would answer questions, write documents in our NetPro forum and Cisco support community, and now just evolved into Cisco communities. I'd also do some tech papers for TAC training, brown bags or whiteboard sessions. I would create presentations for Cisco Live on embedded automation in particular, the EEM, Tickle, Python, that type of thing. I never really considered myself a great writer. Like I mentioned, I convinced my professor to give me writing credit for essentially C and C++ and Java code. I always felt myself more comfortable writing code. But Benoit said, I want to write this book, and I want you to be a part of it. And I'm like, okay. Okay, I'll do it. So he had a pretty clear vision of where he wanted things to go. And he and I have been collaborating on something called the Yang Catalog, yangcatalog.org, around tooling, around data model-driven management. Prior to that, and of course, we were working in the IETF and trying to make some changes there. And so I thought, yeah, I've got a pretty good perspective. I've reviewed some models. I've written some models at this point. I think I can contribute. It was a trying process, in all honesty, because it's not something I consider to be one of my strengths. Also, at the same time, I'd broken my arm pulling one of my airplanes that I don't actually own the airplane, but I was pulling it to park it after I flew it, and I fell backwards and fractured my wrist. So it was trying to type with that was a pain. Fortunately, I was able to get some good transcription service from learning at Cisco and make some headway there, but that was a bit of a challenge as well. But I will say I learned quite a bit, not just in the whole authoring process with Pearson, but also from Jan and Benoit. We reviewed each other's chapters. We contributed text to each other's chapters. And, you know, Jan, for example, has tremendous experience writing Yang modules and seeing how he would evolve the book zone model through his work, and I would take it into the tooling section and just see how it went from something that was very simple to something that was very powerful, a little bit more complex, but making elegant use of the Yang language. It was great, and it's been kind of a great process as well to hear from some of the experts that contributed to the stories in the book. About how things evolve from the S&MP world into where we are today. It was ultimately rewarding, but again, not something that I thought was one of my strong suits, but I really did enjoy the learning process, and ultimately what we produced, I think, is an amazing reference for people at all roles within the operations space that are working with these data models.
Well, you know, Joe, one of my questions was going to be like, what was one of your challenges? But I have to say, it never crossed my mind that it would be a broken arm. So that's really amazing. And thank you so much for sharing all that. So one of the things I would like to ask you before you start your presentation, and the last one is going to be like, well, who would be actually the target audience for this network programmability book with Yang?
Well, we really designed it to look to appeal to everyone in the operations space, depending on your role. And we thought about roles and personas as we were writing it. So it's there for just the kind of there's elements in the beginning that might appeal to a CTO, CIO who just wants to understand the landscape and the challenges and why, you know, the wherefore of model-driven programmability and how it can have a better, richer impact on network management and operations than some of the more traditional approaches. Then, of course, it's designed for that operator, that network engineer who is using the interfaces, the protocols, the netconf, the restconf, the GNMI, as part of either their configuration management or their operational data gathering or their event management with streaming telemetry. And we've got, I mentioned Jan's book zone model. We've got definitely sections in there geared towards the architect and module author who's looking to create perhaps service modules for their organization, or service models and Yang modules for their organization to do things like VPN provisioning, tunnel provisioning, or other service level provisioning. And finally, for application developers, people who want to create maybe controllers on top of some of these, leveraging some of these protocols and ingesting some of these data models. So it's geared very much towards those network engineers and software developers and looking at model-driven management and programmability, but we try to be very flexible and open in terms of the individual personas that might benefit from the content.
Well, I have to say thank you for that, because like that's something that is everyone who has to take care of that one right now. It's not something that we can skip. So, well, thank you so much, Joe, for sharing more of your career path, your experience, and your collaboration in this book. So now it is time for you to present, Joe. So, well, Joe, this is your time. So I'm gonna go to this is the first slide. So just let me know when you want me to move, okay?
Yep, will do. So like I said, I've been at Cisco now for just about 22 years, and I started out, if you're familiar with Cisco Works, just when Cisco Works was transitioning to this Java and Perl-based application. SNMP is all the rage in terms of network management, and just kind of the only thing we're offering in terms of being able to get any visibility or instrumentation out of your devices revolve either around SNMP or CLI. So this was at least my beginning, and this is what Cisco offered, and they were maybe okay. They may be sufficient. Certainly, when that's all you got, you make do. But we had a number of challenges with that. And just as one brief example from the CLI space, supporting Cisco Works in a sub-application called Resource Manager Essentials, which would archive the configuration from your network devices, which admittedly is an important thing to do when you're doing operations. You need to have a recent copy of your config. And I had one customer who, every time they went to archive the configuration, it would say failed. And this was still back in the day when Telnet was, again, all the rage. So we broke out Ethereal, which was the predecessor of Wireshark, and we did a packet capture. And I got the capture of RME trying to fetch the configuration from the device. And it looked like it was succeeding. You know, it did a show run, term length 0, term width 0, show run, boom. Got the config, failed. I go, well, why is this failing? So I start to dig into the code and looking around, and then I noticed something, that there is this big, long, regular expression in the code, Java code, that looked at lines of the configuration. So what it was trying to do essentially is say, if I type, the computer types show run, and it gets back output that matches this regular expression, then that is a failure. So trying to heuristically guess whether or not the show run command had failed. It had gotten so bad with so many different device types and so many different iOS versions and flavors and nuances that the regular expression was essentially just a big set of ORs, like blah, pipe, foo, pipe, bar, so on and so forth. And at the end there was a pipe error. So match this or this or this or this or this or the string error. And when I looked at the customer's configuration, one of their interface descriptions said, error, do not use this interface. Perfectly valid configuration, but because it matched that string, failure to archive the configuration. So CLI, it's good, it's great for humans to consume, but as a means of automation, as a means of having reliable, understandable, machine-consumable output from the device, it just fell short. And while SNMP was great in terms of operational data collection, like statistics from the device, it just didn't do well with configuration management. And it was kind of hard. The management information base, the MIB modules, the ASN.1 on the wire was confusing. It just didn't make sense in a modern network world. There we go. So ultimately, the industry decided that there needed to be a change and put forth this notion of a configuration management protocol called NetConf. And they had a whole RFC dedicated to the reasons that we needed more modern network management and the deficiencies of SNMP with respect to config management. And in the beginning, NetConf was kind of meh. It used XML schema definition for its schemas. It was supported over SSH, and there was other protocols like the BEAT protocol that it supported. But it really wasn't adopted. Part of the reason was it was really hard to get the schema agreed upon and ratified through the IETF. But then there was some more work done by the likes of some people who are mentioned in this book, like Andy Bierman, to create a new data modeling language that was very much geared towards network management or the network infrastructure, and that is Yang. And when that happened, there was a sort of a resurgence or new momentum towards this paradigm of network management, config management, operational management. And still, there were issues trying to get these models or modules ratified through the IETF, and that's where Benoit, as an area director, was really influential in trying to streamline some of that process. Admittedly, we've still got ways to go there, but the industry really took notice of Yang and particularly NetConf on top of Yang, and that led to, with the popularity of RESTful APIs, this notion of a RESTconf protocol as well that could feel more REST-like and still make use of these data models. So, industry-wise, people were waking up to this paradigm, and the book starts out with a chapter from Benoit exploring exactly what I talked about, kind of where network management had gone and what the status of it was, and why we needed to shift into model-driven management and programmability. And he starts to talk through what Yang brings to the table, and then what these protocols built on it allow us to do, and open up new capabilities and new use cases, especially around this world of streaming telemetry and devices sending us all this data, or sending us data on trigger, on change, so that we can make the best use of it, get the most relevant and real-time information out of our devices. That led to this question. Automation is only as good as. So again, back in the day, we had all of these S&MP MIDs, and we instrumented quite a bit, in all fairness. Maybe not necessarily industry-wide. You know, there wasn't a lot of RFC MIDs that had a lot of great detail that were adopted across all vendors. But each vendor took it upon themselves, and they're still doing that admittedly in the Yang world, but took it upon themselves to define MID modules for specific things. So Cisco, of course, was defining things that were relevant to our subsystems and our features. EIGRP, for example, we had an EIGRP MID module. We had things specifically for Cisco memory pool and Cisco CPU and things of that nature, Cisco process. Problem was, yes, we had the instrumentation. Yes, we had the models, so to speak, but we didn't have tooling. We didn't have metadata that says these MIDs are supported in this platform at this release of iOS or software, and with these capabilities, or with these deviations, so to speak. We didn't have that, and as a result, we still weren't helping our customers effectively. Because yes, oh yeah, we've got a MID for that, but you don't know whether or not it works in your platform. You don't really know how to make use of it. You don't know if it's going to be exactly the data that you want. And Benoit and I grew up in TAC, so we saw this problem firsthand, and what we wanted to do with Yang was do better. It's got to be better than just the data models. We needed a set of tooling around this. We needed a set of metadata, or we needed a way of presenting that metadata that modules and models had, so that the users of them could be fully aware of what was required to make use of them and make effective use of them. So that's what led to this work around the Yang catalog. I mentioned it before, yangcatalog.org, where we started to catalog, to take all of these models, not just from Cisco, not just from the IETF, but from other vendors, from Juniper, from Huawei, from other standards definition organizations like the Broadband Forum and MEF, and collect them together and start to pull all that metadata out, offer search interfaces on top of this, offer ways of being able to see how models and modules interact and interrelate, so that people would have a better picture of what is supported, what models or what modules or what leafs, what nodes are the most useful for specific things. And we want to take those tools further to bring them closer to how do I find out what is supported exactly in my platform, in my version of code. How do I know how a model has changed between one revision or one version of code and the next version of code? And are those changes non-backwards compatible that might break any tooling I have? So the question we began to ask ourselves was, automation as good as the tools, the models, and the metadata? And the ultimate answer is yes, it's got to be all of that. If you don't have a complete and holistic picture with the tool chain involved, you don't have effective automation. So you need more than just handing you a data model, just handing you an API alone isn't sufficient if you don't know how to make use of that API and if that API can't be well integrated into the tooling that you have. So that's what, within the book, we have chapters, specifically my chapters, around the tooling, around the metadata, around the how do I integrate these models, these modules into the work that I'm doing, either as that network engineer, that network architect, or that application developer. And we explore a number of different tools that help you make better use of Yang and model-driven management and model-driven programmability from all sides, from the config management side, the operational data side, and understanding how you can find the right objects to create the right streaming telemetry subscriptions, either dialing into the device or having the device dial out and, for example, send you data to so at the time we were using Pipeline, but now you would use Telegraph and InfluxDB and Grafana as means of getting the information from your network and presenting it. The other thing I mentioned is not just for the network engineer and using the models, but if you have the need, and many organizations do now, to define, so Cisco provides you a number of network element models, Yang modules that you can make use of, but you might want to stitch those together to create a service definition for your organization, meaning I want to create something. It could be as simple as I want to deploy an end-to-end VPN tunnel in my network, but in order to do that, I've got to touch and configure multiple different devices along a path in order to achieve that end-to-endness, and then there's data that I want to pull out of those devices. So I might define what's called a service module, a service model, that I specify these are the parameters that I would need from a higher level configuration management application, or my intent. I need a source node, I need a destination node, I need a encapsulation, I might need some security parameters. Those would then get processed by that higher level engine, and then it would use the network element or device modules to actually configure the device and then collect data from the underlying VPN element. But in order to do that, in order to be an effective module author, there are best practices you can use. There's, again, additional tools, a Yang catalog and others that can help you become a more effective Yang module or overall data model developer. And we go through examples of that in the book, of how to make use of those tools and how to evolve your models and make use of some of those best practices, as well as make use of things that others have done and come before, and have established some good guidelines in terms of module authorship. The final thing, and this was one of Benoit's, I think, pretty great ideas in the book, which was, let's take a time in each chapter to reach out to an expert, someone who has been instrumental in defining either the Yang data modeling language or in defining the protocols or in building the kind of end-to-end or overall architecture. And you'll find at the end of each one of these chapters an interview with these individuals, and I've listed the names here of all of them who not just contributed to the book in terms of answering the questions we asked them, but also really made a difference in making the overall impact this has, the stickiness that we're seeing in the industry, and not just Yang, as an example, is not just sticky in the config management area. We're seeing a number of working groups in the IETF, a number of working groups in other standards definitions organizations take up Yang as a data modeling language because of its flexibility and because of its power. And some of the people you see listed on the slide are to thank for that. So hearing from them their trials and tribulations, what worked, what didn't, what they think were some of the things to remember, the more important things to extract from everything you're seeing in terms of this landscape. It was eye-opening for us. It was enlightening for us. But I think it's also going to help tell that story and help people make better decisions in terms of their network operations. So I think that's the last slide I have. I think I'll turn it back over to you unless I forgot about something. But maybe there are other questions. I don't know how you want to do the Q&A.
Yeah, for sure, Joe. Yeah, indeed, that is your last slide. So thank you so much for sharing everything here, all the trends and all your thoughts and all the insights that you know. And indeed, now we are going to follow up on the Q&A. There are actually many questions. So okay. I'm going to read them aloud. So we have this first question that says like this: based on your experience, just curious to know as how we might use the network programmability with Yang in scenarios with UCS or similar servers are involved.
To my knowledge, and certainly in the last UCS manager that I use, they don't yet support the Yang model-driven programmability. That said, the UCS manager does have a rather nice XML API that I've made use of. If you wanted to use Yang with that, you could use something like NSO, Network Services Orchestrator, as that higher level engine. That you can speak Yang to and create network element drivers or the kind of the middleware that would be able to interact with the UCS manager. Unless someone's already done it, it would be probably non-trivial work to make that work. But you could do it if you wanted to build additional Yang models, like those service models I talked about, on top of UCS. In the shorter term, I would say making use of the UCS API, because everything, I believe everything you can do in the UI with UCS Manager, you can do through that API. And certainly I've used it in some of the automation I've done for Cisco Live. It works very well. I would suggest maybe just using that from if you just want to quickly automate. But if you are intent on using the Yang model-driven programmability, you would need something like NSO to act as that middle layer that takes the inbound netconf or restconf and the Yang model-driven management and can translate it to what UCS Manager understands.
All right, so I have another question here, and I think that is something that they always ask the experts like you. What do you consider to be the easiest language to start with in network programmability or programming? Will that be Python?
Well, the first language I started with was AppleScript English, but I don't recommend anyone really get into that for network programmability. Perl was the first language that still, well, AppleScript is still in vogue today if you're a Mac user. But Perl, I still like Perl quite a bit, and I use it to call REST APIs. I've got some Perl code that's still sitting out there. But I then got heavily into Python because that seemed to be the lingua franca for networking these days. And now just about everything I'm doing that touches things like UCS Manager APIs as an example, or RESTconf, or even netconf with NC Client, I'm using Python for that. And I think Python was fairly, I resisted it for a little while because I was Perl. But I really think Python was a fairly easy language to learn. And these days, I tell a lot of people that if they're just getting into it, Python is probably the first thing to pick up.
Okay, and I have another question related to this one. It says, like, I'm learning Python. So how can I use Python with Yang in projects that are related or familiar with ACI and DNA?
So ACI so first of all, how do you use Yang with Python? So there is a set of tools and libraries. It's called PyYang or Pyang or however you want to pronounce it, Pyang essentially. Open source, it's in the PyPy repository, so you can pip install Pyang. And that gives you a lot of power for being able to parse and digest Yang models. That said, you may not need to consume the Yang models as directly as do things like interact with the underlying protocols that make use of the Yang model data. And again, with Python, you can do that. With netconf, Python has the NC client library, so you can pip install NC client. And for RESTconf, you have requests, or you have AIO HTTP, the new asynchronous I/O library in Python 3, later versions of Python 3, that you can use for interacting with RESTconf. And having Pyang on the side is helpful because it can help you print out or understand the tree structure of the models so that you can create the right either netconf payloads or the RESTconf requests in order to get the data you want, in order to configure what you want on the device. In terms of the data models used by ACI, right now ACI has its own data modeling language, so you're not using Yang with that. With DNA Center makes use of netconf for the new wireless LAN controllers, the Catalyst 9800s, and I can see that expanding into more of the Catalyst 9Ks and the iOS XE, the ASR, CSR, ISR devices as well. But on top of DNA Center, you still have, it has its own RESTful API for being able to talk to it, and then it, from a southbound perspective, can speak to the network either using CLI or using the model-driven paradigms. So northbound, on top of both DNA Center and the ACI 8-bit controllers, there are REST APIs or APIs that make use of a different set of data modeling languages, at least for the time being.
Good. Thanks for providing that. I have another question here. It says, I'm getting into Ansible, and it seems that a lot of the documentation that already exists is focused more towards on-box agents like Unix, etc. And I'm more interested in the application of Ansible with XR without the on-box agent. So can you recommend any resource?
Sure. So, well, first of all, Ansible is agent-less, but I think I understand what you're talking about. So if I'm going to automate to a compute node, let's say I'm going to diddle some stuff on a Linux host, Ansible will copy it'll SSH to that host, it'll copy over some Python code and execute it on the host to do things like add a user or apt-get install a package or something along those lines. But with your network elements, your iOS XE, or in your case, iOS XR devices, you don't have that. The good news is you don't need it. So the newer versions of Ansible have a connection method called Network CLI as an example. And what that will do, like I haven't done it with XR. I know I've done it very recently with iOS. And I know the XR modules exist, but there's a module called iOS Command and another called iOS Config that if you use those modules along with the Network CLI connection mechanism, or there's actually also a netconf connection mechanism now, and you can do that with XR as well, then what you send doesn't require, it's all, that bit of the Python, local Python execution that you would get on the Linux host, that happens on the host on which you're running Ansible, and instead what happens is Ansible then SSHs to the target network device and executes either CLI commands or config commands, depending on the module you're using, or in the case of netconf, will make a TCP 830 connection, a netconf SSH connection to the device, and do the edit config or the get config operation, get operation that you want, depending on that network connection type. All of that is documented in the Ansible docs. So you look up the connection types. They have separate sections for, I know iOS has a section there for how you can make use of the network CLI connection. And then there's also, if you look up the netconf module for recent versions of Ansible, you'll see the same thing, how to use that module correctly, and then it doesn't need to actually copy anything onto the target device.
All right, I have a couple of questions more, and we are going to close on this session because of the time. So one of them is, in a network environment, for us to do automation, do you think that other peer languages like C or C++ could also be used as well, or they could be used properly?
Absolutely. Yes. So on developer.cisco.com, there's something called the Yang Development Kit, or YDK. This is a means, since Yang is kind of an API, what this does is compile the Yang modules into language bindings for a number of different languages. And while Python was one of the first ones that's offered out there, so you have Python language bindings that allow you to do things with underlying, say, netconf, but in a more Pythonic way. There are also language bindings for C++. So, you read a lot of online material about what programming languages are in hot demand and what application developers are using. And C++, I personally think the programming language with friends is kind of weird, but C++ is very popular. And of course very performant in terms of being a compiled language, and certainly you can use it in network automation. I have a friend and colleague who helps with the Cisco Live Europe network as well, huge network automation, just automation geek in general, and he swears by the Rust language, which is another compiled language that promises to be, if it compiles, it's generally going to run. It's a very strict language, and he loves it. So and of course Golang is another compiled language that's very popular these days. So while I talk Python, I use it a lot. It's not to say that that's the only language, and I do know C. I do like C quite a bit. You've got to pick the right language, and certainly if performance is what you're going for, large-scale application that needs to be highly performant, looking at those compiled languages like C++, C, maybe Golang or Rust gives you a lot more power because you have that compiled down to machine object code. Like I said, I like C as a programming language. I've used it as part of my work in the FreeBSD project. And I said if you need a large-scale, highly performant application, looking at a compiled language, C++, C, Go, Rust, it's absolutely doable, and I wouldn't shy away from it. Most of these languages have great libraries. As I mentioned, YDK, specifically for Yang, can generate C++ bindings, so it's certainly a very possible and in some cases recommended way to go.
Good. So I have two more questions, and we are going to close down here just to find out who's the winner of this book. So the first of them is, can we have network programmability with Yang, along with telemetry, in IoT devices or sensors in places where we have not much of CPU memory power?
So the answer is yes. There's some work that's happening right now in a working group in the IETF, Siebel, that is looking at different encodings for constrained devices, like the IoT world. And there's a substantial review happening right now, I want to say in the NetMod working group in the IETF on some of these specifications, because that's exactly what they want to do, is to be able to offer model-driven capabilities in these constrained devices. Telemetry included, configuration included. There's obviously challenges there, with power, with how often the device can transmit, what is the methodology. So for example, there was some recent work, fairly recent work in the IETF to do netconf call home, where a device initiates the connection, because oftentimes these IoT devices might not be reachable and they only come online periodically. So the answer is ultimately, I think, yes, you'll see that. I think the work is still ongoing to make it more of a reality.
So I just say, like, they know you're a very busy person from everything you have been mentioning, and they're just wondering how you manage to do it, everything that you do.
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure others. I'm sure others do a lot more. I'm not sure they do. I don't know. I like what I do. So it's oftentimes a lot of fun. I guess I have also a case of fear of missing out, so I tend to say yes to a lot of things, maybe more than I should. But you know, I try to learn from all of those experiences. Sometimes, yeah, ultimately I end up having to say no, but you just have to balance things out and not try at the same time not to burn yourself out. And of course, having a hobby like flying, or just writing code on the weekends in a project that interests you, can sometimes re-energize you, depending on the type of person. I happen to be that type of person, I guess. So yeah, you find time for what you like. In fact, I was telling my instructor one day, he's like, man, I can't find, I'm traveling all over the place. This, of course, was before COVID. I'm traveling all over the place. Work is, I'm really busy. I just don't have time to fly. And he said to me, he said, well, you find time to do what's important to you. And if it's important to you, because I was going for my multi-engine at the time, and it was just taking a long time because I couldn't build up the hours. So if it's important to you, you'll find time. You'll shuffle some things around. Maybe you'll take some PTO and do it. So I took that to heart, because it didn't just mean with flying. It means just in general. If something's important to you, you'll prioritize it.
That is correct, and that is true. And thank you so much for sharing everything, Joe. And that concludes today's event. So now we are going to announce the winner. And for all of you that did not have the chance to join on time, yes, the recording of this session is going to be available on the Cisco community, actually just on the event page that you just registered for this event. And I would like to thank not only Joe, but also the team behind and all of the audience, because without you, these events couldn't be possible. Also, we would like to share with you some extra resources and references that can help you out to learn more about this topic. Some of the books at Cisco Press related to programmability are coming out in August or July, so have a look there. And also more content about this topic in the new certification from CCNP and CCIA. And well, I would like to take this moment, we have different runner-ups, but I have to verify that they were Cisco members, and I'm actually kind of excited to announce today's winner. It's actually in Spain. And so I would say hola and felicidades, which means congratulations, and that goes to Guillermo Ruiz, which is actually someone who is very into all programmability. So I'm very glad you are going to win this one. Someone from the Cisco community will contact you via email and directly as well. So congratulations, Guillermo, and we hope you like this book, and we will find more for you. And for the rest of you, this does not end up here. I have great news. We had a chat with Pearson and Cisco Press, and we would like to provide a percentage, a discount for all of the attendees of this event. The only thing you have to do to get the discount is just fill out the survey that is going to come out after this event concludes. And by doing that, you also are helping us to find out how we are doing on these events, what kind of topics and authors you would like to see on future events. And, well, in that way we can improve and provide you better experience, okay? So by doing that, you will earn a special discount. So thank you very much. You will also find more details about that discount on the chat and also on the emails. Thank you emails with the information of this event that you will receive directly in your email. So thank you for today. I wish you have a great time, great evening, great morning, a great afternoon, and thank you so much once again, Joe. You're an excellent person and an amazing expert. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thank you, guys. So we will see you next time.